options. In your course material and discussions, you explored the answers to these questions related to sustainable heating. Why is sustainable heating important? How does energy use for heating compare across states and countries? What are conventional and alternative heating options? How do conventional and alternative heating options work? What sustainability implications are associated with conventional and alternative heating options? And how can we compare these implications quantitatively through sustainability indicators? In the Week 11 intro video, we revisited this graph of the U.S. energy picture, which shows that nearly 1/3 of total U.S. energy goes toward heating applications, including industrial, residential, and commercial heating. Although heating does consume such a large portion of total energy, it has received relatively little attention in terms of improving overall energy sustainability, compared with transportation and electricity. This is a shame because sustainable heating solutions can oftentimes be complementary to residential and commercial sustainable electricity options. For example, solar photovoltaic panels and micro wind turbines can be used to generate electricity for a residence or business, while also powering an electric heat pump for space heating needs. Although residential heating makes up a smaller percentage of U.S. energy use compared to industrial, it is important to examine for this course because it is one area in which you have the power to make change. This map shows the current state of fuel use for residential heating in the United States. About half of the 110 million heated homes in the U.S. rely on natural gas for home heating, and most of the rest rely on electricity. However, this trend changes depending on region. Here in the Northeast, we are still mostly reliant on natural gas, but more than 1/4 of New England homes still rely on heating oil, also known as fuel oil. If we take a closer look in New England, we would see that more than 70% of Maine homes rely on fuel oil for their heating needs. Although the previous map only showed a small sliver of the pie to represent U.S. homes dependent on wood for heating, more and more states are relying on wood. All 9 states in the New England and the Middle Atlantic Census divisions saw at least a 50% jump from 2005 to 2012 in the number of households that rely on wood as the main heating source. Maine saw over a 100% increase. In total, about 2.5 million households across the country use wood as the main fuel for home heating, up from 1.9 million households in 2005. An additional 9 million households use wood as a secondary heating fuel. Heating stoves are the most common equipment used by households that rely on wood as the main source of heat, and fireplaces are the most common choice for secondary wood heating. Most households still burn split logs, although wood pellet use has risen in recent years. And while households in higher income brackets are more likely to use wood, those at lower income levels who burn wood consume more on average. The EIA website shown in the upper right corner allows you to view a 2-page fact sheet for 16 representative states in the United States. The closest one to Maine is Massachusetts, and the Massachusetts fact sheet includes data on New England in comparison to the U.S. average. As mentioned before, more households in New England use fuel oil for heating than the U.S. average. Although New England homes are older and bigger than the U.S. average, which probably leads to more heating inefficiencies and older equipment. Also, more energy is used for space heating than any other residential application in New England because of the cold weather. The International Energy Agency report, Worldwide Trends in Energy Use and Efficiency, discusses how household energy use varies from country to country and region to region in 1990 and 2005. Global energy use in the household sector increased between 1990 and 2005 by 19% to reach 82 exajoules. The graph shows 100% on the y-axis, which makes it appear that energy use was the same in each year, but the actual values for energy use are shown here, and are larger for each country and region in 2005 than in 1990, except for Russia, where there is a decrease. Households are the only major end-use sector where the increase in energy consumption since 1990 has been greater in OECD countries, or countries that are part of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, which are commonly referred to as developed countries. Household energy use in OECD countries increased by 22% between 1990 and 2005, whereas household energy use in non-OECD countries, commonly referred to as developing countries, increased by 18%. Although some of this increase in OECD Europe is from more natural gas use for heating, and some in the US and Canada is from increased residential renewables, most likely wood for heating, much of the increase in OECD countries can be attributed to increased electricity use for home electronics and appliances, like computers, iPads, iPhones, etc. In non-OECD countries, renewable energy remains the dominant energy commodity, accounting for 59% of final energy use, but its share is decreasing. Also, this renewable energy is primarily traditional biomass, which refers to things like burning cow dung in open pits in a hut, not exactly environmentally or public health friendly renewable energy. As a result of increases in final energy consumption and changes to the energy mix, global household CO2 emissions increased between 1990 and 2005 by 21% to reach 4.5 gigatons of CO2. This is slightly more than the increase in final energy use, implying that not only did household energy use increase, but current household energy supply options have become more carbon intensive. The IEA report shows how this translates to household CO2 emissions per person in different countries and regions. Residents of the United States, Canada, and Russia clearly use the most energy per person in residential applications. And energy use per capita in the United States and Canada has been increasing or staying relatively stable in recent years, whereas it has been decreasing in Europe and Russia. Although residential energy use is still low in China and India, it is on the rise, and with such large populations, this is going to be a real problem for the future environment and public health as these countries increase their standard of living. This is one reason why it's important for nations like the United States, Canada, and countries in Europe to find ways to reduce household emissions per capita, lower technology costs associated with these emissions through wider adoption and economies of scale, so cleaner options will be adopted in places like China and India as these countries develop. And this graph again underscores the importance of finding sustainable alternatives to heating, because space heating is responsible for more than half of global household energy use. This share is decreasing, but only because the appliances share is increasing due to more and more electronic gadgets being used in homes, like smartphones, tablets, game centers, etc. The quantity of energy use for space heating is still on the rise worldwide and will continue to rise as people in non-OECD countries gain access to the same comforts we have been used to here in the United States. This week's course materials covered several readings and videos to help you understand what conventional and alternative heating options are, how they work, and the sustainability implications associated with them, including a conventional fossil fuel-fired furnace, propane and heating oil. You covered natural gas in Unit 2. Geothermal heat pumps, solar thermal systems, and weatherization and efficiency options. The IEA report, Renewables for Heating and Cooling, provides a good overview of the renewable options shown here and the sustainability implications associated with them. Box 2 briefly describes each option considered in the IEA analysis and some options not included, but still important to sustainable home energy use, like passive solar, for example. Chapter 2 explains how solar thermal, biomass, and geothermal heating options work more in depth. Although this report focuses on geothermal heat pumps, they note that heat pumps can be used with any electricity source to reduce energy use from fossil fuels and conventional electric heating systems. Therefore, another renewable home heating option not examined in the IEA study but currently available to homeowners is an electric heat pump powered by a small wind turbine or solar photovoltaic array. These options have the additional advantage of being able to supply electricity for other home energy uses, such as appliances and gadgets, as well as being able to reduce energy use in transportation by powering electric vehicles. This may be the most sustainable integrated way to address home electric, heating, and transportation needs all at the same time, especially when incorporated with battery storage. Efficiency Maine is the organization that is charged with carrying out the energy efficiency and renewable energy incentive programs for the state of Maine. Their webpage on weatherization solutions presents information on measures that can be taken to improve the efficiency of home heating systems, including having a professional energy assessment to identify where your home is losing most of its heat, implementing air sealing solutions to eliminate drafty areas, and insulation, which can cut heating costs by 40% or more, especially in older and larger homes. As in previous weeks, the course materials this week presented some information about some of the sustainability implications shown here, as well as others, in relation to several conventional and alternative heating options. One important concept to keep in mind from a technical sustainability point of view is the difference in quality of heat. Temperature is an indication of the value of heat, as classified by high, over 250 degrees Celsius, medium, between 80 and 250 degrees Celsius, and low, below 80 degrees Celsius. When a certain amount of heat needed for a low temperature energy service, for example space heating, is supplied from high value, high temperature heat, the quality, or exergy, of the energy is irreversibly lost. As a consequence, the higher quality energy does not present its maximum possible effect in the energy system. The IEA report presents a merit order of actions for residential heating that is designed to conserve the quality of the heat supply as much as possible. In other words, to improve the efficiency of the overall system. Based on this merit order, if you want to make heating more sustainable in your home, you should first start with implementing energy efficiency and conservation options. Then implement passive solar heating solutions, and then solar thermal or geothermal where possible. Geothermal heat pumps powered by renewable electricity would be the next best option. After that, biomass options can be considered. The IEA report presents a similar ranking for cooling options as well. In terms of economic sustainability, similar to other petroleum products, heating oil prices depend on the cost of crude oil, the cost to produce the product, the cost to market and distribute the product, as well as the profits, and sometimes losses, of refiners, wholesalers, and dealers. In 2011, crude oil accounted for 68% of the cost of a gallon of heating oil. The next largest component, distribution and marketing costs and profits, accounted for approximately 22% of the cost of a gallon of heating oil. Refinery processing costs and profits accounted for another 13%. Similar to other petroleum products, these costs and prices can vary over time and by where a consumer lives. Prices can change based on seasonality in the demand for heating oil. Basically, when crude oil prices are stable, home heating oil prices tend to gradually rise in the winter months when demand is highest. However, at times, prices can surge quickly to very high levels. A homeowner in the Northeast might use 850 to 1,200 gallons of heating oil during a typical winter, while consuming very little during the rest of the year. Prices can also change based on changes in the cost of crude oil. Because crude oil is a major price component of heating oil, changes in the price of crude oil will generally affect the price of heating oil. Crude oil prices are determined by worldwide supply and demand. Demand can vary worldwide with the economy and with weather. Supply can be influenced by the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, or OPEC, and other factors. Prices can also change based on competition in local markets. Competitive differences can be substantial between a locality with only one or a few suppliers or dealers versus an area with a large number of competitors. Consumers in remote or rural locations face higher prices because there are fewer competitors. Prices can also change based on regional operating costs because prices are impacted by higher costs of transporting the product to remote locations. In addition, the cost of doing business by dealers can vary substantially depending on the area of the country where the dealer is located. Costs of doing business include wages and salaries, benefits, equipment, lease, rent, insurance, overhead, and state and local fees. Home heating oil prices sometimes can change dramatically in a short period of time because a rapid change to colder weather can impact both supply and demand. People want more fuel at the same time that harbors and rivers are frozen for delivery or delivery systems are interrupted. The IEA Renewable Heating and Cooling Report compares the cost of 11 different renewable heating options to the cost of conventional options and breaks down the cost of renewables by cost component. Operation and maintenance costs are shown in purple. Auxiliary energy, meaning the cost of energy to make up for intermittent renewable supply. For example, the cost of natural gas to back up a solar heating system when the sun doesn't shine. This component is shown in yellow. The fuel cost is shown in purple, and the upfront investment cost is shown in blue. There is a range of costs for each option presented by the vertical black bars for the renewables and by the shaded rectangle for the conventional fuels. These ranges reflect the range of costs reported in data that the IEA obtained for this analysis. And since these data were from all over the world, in some cases the range is quite large, like for solar thermal, where the cost depends greatly on location. Based on these data ranges, biomass and deep geothermal technologies are the most cost competitive for heating applications. Solar water heating costs can be competitive under certain conditions, as shown by the range bar. The full set of assumptions for these calculations are presented in Annex A of the report. These costs are expected to change in the future. Conventional energy prices are expected to increase by 2030, partly due to carbon taxes, whereas the costs of renewable technologies could decline considerably by that time due to further learning experience, particularly for technologies currently at an early stage of development. This, however, could be partially offset by the future prices of materials such as steel and aluminum. This table shows the difference between the ranges of current and future costs for the renewables. Solar thermal costs are projected to decrease by the greatest percentage, while deep conventional geothermal is actually expected to increase. This table also shows the current installed global capacity and energy output for these options. The cost and current capacity of these technologies depend on where the technologies are in terms of state of deployment. The IEA defines 3 generations of renewable technologies: development, early market, and mass market. Developing technologies have a high cost gap relative to conventional technologies in the market and still need policy support. Early market second generation technologies have a relatively low cost gap and learning experience that often helps them become more cost effective. By the time they reach the mass market, they are usually cost competitive. Renewable energy technologies that are commercially mature and can compete with conventional technology are referred to as mature or first generation technologies. Examples include passive solar building design, solar water heaters, biomass combustion, and deep geothermal power generation. Early market technologies have not reached a sufficient level of maturity to compete in the mass market without some form of support mechanism. Typically, they entail only relatively low additional government support, perhaps to encourage further research and development to provide favorable technological and economic conditions in order for them to reach the mass market. Further improvements of performance can often be made due to different mechanisms that contribute to cost reductions over time, called technology learning. Solar active heating, biogas digestion, pellet combustion, and shallow geothermal heat using heat pumps are now entering markets as a result of worldwide research and development investments, together with increased prices for conventional energy sources. Solar thermal systems are already widely used in countries such as Cyprus, China, Germany, Austria, Turkey, and Israel, primarily for hot water supply, but also for heating swimming pools and residential space heating. Elsewhere, without government incentives, they remain at the early market stage. Technologies in the research and development and demonstration phase, third generation, have a far larger cost gap relative to conventional technologies, and therefore need stronger support measures, mainly in the form of research and development. Research, development, and demonstration is important for all energy technologies that have not been able to exploit their full market potential. Improved cost effectiveness and ease of use should be the goals in order to produce widespread deployment. Public research, development, and deployment investment by IEA countries for renewable energy was relatively high after the oil price shocks in the 1970s, but then decreased by 30% by the early 1990s, and has remained around that level ever since, though some small increase has been observed more recently. Although public research investment in biomass has remained reasonably consistent, solar heating and cooling received around $400 million in 1979, decreasing to $30 million by 2002. Geothermal received around $450 million, decreasing to $58 million over the same period. Overall, the investment in RD&D for renewable heating technologies has decreased, in part due to the prioritization of renewable energy power generation and biofuels. If the challenges of growing energy demand, energy security, and environmental concerns are to be met, then greater investment in renewable energy, RD&D, and in particular in renewable heating that has recently lagged behind, is needed by both the public and private sector. Improved competitiveness is necessary for moving from early markets to mass markets. For example, solar heating and cooling technologies are already close to full competitiveness, with the potential for a quick return on investment. Solar water heating technologies are reliable, but their capital costs can make them appear more expensive to the potential purchaser compared to conventional water heating systems. However, if costed over a full life cycle, then this is not the case, particularly if future projected electricity or gas charges are taken into account. During the last decade, capital cost reductions of around 20% have been observed for each doubling of installed capacity of solar water heaters. Further research and development investment can help to drive these costs down further. The graph in the lower right-hand corner puts these numbers into perspective of historical average subsidies for oil and gas, O&G, nuclear, and biofuels in the United States compared with renewables. Although some may argue that renewables should not continue to receive subsidies, we have a long history of subsidizing oil, gas, nuclear, and coal that continues today. Renewables have seen a much smaller share of this support than conventional fuels over their respective lifetimes. If you are interested in reading more, you can find the article, "What Would Jefferson Do?" in the optional reading folder for this week. Part of the reason there is such a wide range of values for the cost of different home heating options is because the cost depends greatly on location and the specific resources available. If you are interested in how costs compare in Maine, go to the Efficiency Maine cost comparison websites for space heating and water heating. Just look for the row that best describes your current heating system, then press the increase or decrease buttons until the annual cost approximates yours. You can also modify price and efficiency assumptions. You can also click on some of the heating system names to learn more about the options. You can do similar calculations for water heating options here. Again, look for the row that best describes your current water heating system, then press the increase or decrease buttons until the annual cost approximates yours. You can also modify fuel price assumptions, and you can change how many people use the water heating system. You can also click on the names of different options for more information. Click the link below the calculator to learn about incentives to help reduce the upfront costs of some systems. In terms of environmental and social sustainability, although biomass is defined as a carbon-neutral energy carrier due to the short-cycle carbon loop, atmospheric emissions should not be ignored. They differ for each type of biomass. The related CO2 emissions, however, are not accounted for in national emissions registers and are not considered in the European CO2 emissions trading scheme. When applying carbon dioxide capture and storage, bioenergy offers the only option to actually withdraw CO2 from the environment. In addition, soil carbon levels can be increased or decreased by growing energy crops depending on the crop type and the cultivation and harvesting methods used. In addition, the largest contribution to worldwide renewable energy is the use of traditional biomass combusted in open fires by around 2.5 billion people living in developing countries who rely on biomass for household uses. And an estimated 1.3 million die prematurely each year from resulting indoor air pollution from carbon monoxide, hydrocarbons, and particulate matter. These can be reduced by the use of well-designed stoves that can better control the combustion process and filtering of exhaust gases. Emissions from modern designs of enclosed wood stoves, as used for domestic heating in developed countries, can also produce emissions which can cause local air pollution, especially when firewood with high moisture contents is used. When well-designed enclosed domestic stoves are operated correctly, then these emissions can be minimized. But due to the wide range of fuels used and the varying ability and understanding of the operators, this is often not the case in practice. Commercial bioenergy heat production plants produce around 5 to 15 grams per gigajoule of particulate matter, whereas domestic wood stoves can emit up to 150 grams per gigajoule. There aren't too many barriers to adopting sustainable home heating options from a technical perspective, and over the long term, many of these options are even now cost-effective and expected to become more so in the near future. Except for traditional biomass, most renewable options offer significant environmental and health benefits. So why don't we see these options in every home? The main challenges and barriers are associated with social sustainability implications. First, there is a serious lack of awareness. Many people don't know these options exist and/or are available right now to implement in their own homes. Renewable heating options are often not taken into account in municipal planning or in private building investments because builders and planners are unaware they exist or think they are too complicated or too futuristic to consider, or that they are way more expensive than they actually are. For example, were you aware that there are currently about 40 companies in Maine that install solar energy systems for homes and businesses? Part of my research involves examining the solar energy market in Maine, and I am in the process of producing a consumer guide to solar energy for Mainers that will help spread awareness of the options and benefits of renewable heating in this state. The second barrier is capacity building. Training, especially of engineers and installers, is important for the deployment of renewable heating technologies. Lack of knowledge and competence in professionals working in energy service companies or as heating installers, architects, building developers, or city planners is a barrier to diffusion. To have enough competent installers located close to customers is also crucial to provide ongoing repairs and maintenance services of the installed systems. The third barrier is behavior, and this has three main components: path dependency, split incentives, and cost structure. Path dependency refers to the fact that there is already a certain infrastructure, norm, or pathway in place for home heating. For example, people in Maine are used to getting their fuel oil delivered by truck once a week or month, and they don't want to change even if it is less expensive in the long run or better for the environment and health. In countries where renewable heating is already widespread, these path dependencies were disrupted a long time ago. For example, Sweden has used woody biomass for district heating for a long time. In countries where there is no history of district heating, it would be more difficult to introduce a biomass district heating system because the paradigm shift from distributed heating systems would be unattractive for the current owners of conventional appliances. A shift could be even more difficult when there are no successful examples that planners can refer to. Hence the value of demonstration plants, even though their capital costs may be high. Split incentives refer to the fact that in rental properties there is little incentive for the landlord to invest in efficient renewable technologies that would reduce ongoing heating and cooling bills because these costs are carried by the lessee. Conversely, the lessee has little possibility to benefit from any incentives to invest in fixed equipment for a rental property because there is a risk of moving out before the end of the payback period. Cost structure refers to the fact that renewable technologies may become more cost efficient in the longer term, but a current barrier that can be the relatively high upfront costs of the installation. If the simple payback method is used to estimate the attractiveness of a renewable technology investment, it could seem less valuable than if payback is calculated based on net present value, which allows for better representation of long-term benefits. If these initial costs can't be overcome, then the long-term decreases in costs will never happen. Finally, there is a big need for measurability. Sound statistics on conventional and renewable energy use are the essential basis for market analysis, successful policy making, and evaluation. Heat production is not usually metered, but can be crudely assessed based on the total capacity of the number of installed systems and an estimate of heat outputs. Heat production and use need to be more accurately measured to be able to show how well a renewable option might perform and reduce costs compared to the current situation. Similar to electricity use, people need more accurate and instantaneous information about their energy use for heating so they can make improvements. A good example of this lack of awareness relates to solar water heating in the United States. Although it is already mature, market-ready, and cost-competitive in many countries around the world, regardless of whether countries are sunny or cloudy, the U.S. potential for this renewable home heating option is largely untapped. Currently, the U.S. ranks 9th in total installed capacity of the type of solar collectors that are used for domestic hot water needs. We do use a lot of unglazed plastic flat plate collectors for swimming pool heating, though. China, Turkey, Germany, Japan, Israel, and others have much larger solar water heating markets and lower costs due to more aggressive policies, greater public awareness, and therefore higher adoption levels. The U.S. solar water heating market looks even worse when presented in per capita terms. Our geothermal heat pump market is looking pretty good by comparison, however. World leaders in geothermal direct heat use in 2005 were China, Sweden, US, Turkey, Iceland, and Japan, with corresponding installed capacities of 3.7 gigawatts thermal to 0.8 gigawatts thermal, respectively. Though the world geothermal installed heat capacity, 28 gigawatts thermal, is around one-third of all the total installed solar thermal capacity, the heat energy yields are similar due to the typically higher load factors. Each megawatt of solar thermal capacity provides around 0.5 to 0.7 gigawatt hours per year of heat, depending on location, whereas each megawatt of geothermal capacity produces about 2.5 gigawatt hours per year, giving a load factor over 4 times higher. Geothermal heat pumps were used in 33 countries in 2005, having risen from 26 countries in 2000, with a threefold increase in installed capacity. The corresponding heat use increase was estimated to be almost fourfold. Direct applications of geothermal energy are diverse, with around 32% of the energy provided by heat pumps for space heating, 30% used for bathing and swimming, and 20% for direct space heating. Geothermal heat pumps have been taken up very quickly in the United States. This marks the end of Unit 3, Sustainable Transportation and Heating. Next week we will begin the final unit of the course, Citizen Action for Sustainable Energy, in which you will finally learn what you can do with all of this information in order to effect change. But before beginning Unit 4, don't forget to take the Unit 3 exam. Similar to previous exams, the Unit 3 exam will consist of 20 multiple-choice questions. You are not allowed to communicate with any other person while taking the exam, unless you need to ask me or the TA a question to clarify something. Please review course material before beginning the exam. Make sure to study the weekly recap and introduction videos in particular. You will have 1.5 hours to complete it once you start the exam. During that time, you can log in and out of the website, shut down, and restart your computer as necessary, but it will be 1.5 hours total from the moment you begin. The exam will open at 8 a.m. on Thursday, April 10th, and will close at 11:59 p.m. on Sunday, April 13th. At that point, any answers you have saved will be submitted, and if you haven't answered anything, you will receive a 0.